The following podcast may contain discussion of domestic and/or sexual violence, stalking, suicide, and PTSD. There is also the possibility of strong language that may be inappropriate for young listeners.
Highlines Help would like to take a moment to talk about Coulee Cuts Beef in Conrad, Montana. They are a family-owned ranch that delivers wonderful beef to your front door, or you can go into the store and purchase it. They are really great with giving donations to Highlines Help of ground beef for victims who need a little bit extra in their freezer when they're trying to start over. We really appreciate all they do for us. Give them a look up on Facebook if you're local to the Conrad area. They are also on Instagram, and they have a store in Conrad on 4th Avenue. So we would just like to shout out to Coulee Cuts for all they do for our program and for the community. Thank you very much, Coulee Cuts Beef. Hi everyone, welcome to Breaking the Silence, bringing domestic violence and sexual assault into the light. On today's podcast, we are talking to Anna, who is an advocate at Highlines Help, and we're getting to know her and a little bit about her history. We're going to discuss some things with Anna today, how she feels about barriers to leaving and the rise in male victims. It should be a very interesting conversation with Anna. She's been working with the program for several years now and has gotten to know quite a bit about working with male victims. For some reason, she tends to get all the calls that come in from male victims. We really don't plan it that way. That's just how it seems to happen. We're going to talk to Anna today, so enjoy the podcast.
Hi again, this is Connie Huffman with Highlines Help for Abused Spouses and our podcast part to get to know our staff. And today I have with me Anna Tote. And Anna, thanks for coming and agreeing to do this. And if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your work history and how you ended up here.
Okay, well, my work history is primarily in the medical field, in respiratory therapy. And I was probably worked in that field for about 35 years. And then came to Highlines Help. What's it been now, 6 years?
Yeah, I believe it'll be 6 years now, 1st of August.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, so about 6 years ago, you needed an advocate, and I wasn't going to work respiratory therapy anymore, so you asked me if I'd like to try it, so I applied for the job, got the job, and been here ever since.
Okay, and do you have a family? Do you have children, grandchildren?
We have three children, lots of grandchildren, and lots of great-grandchildren, but I would have to sit here and count them on my fingers to tell you how many I have. I just know for sure I have 3 children.
But you do know that.
I do know that. Yes, that part I do know.
Okay, well, that's good to know how many kids you got. You have been working with Highlines Help for 6 years. And during that 6 years, what would you say is the hardest for you or the easiest for you?
Well, the hardest, I guess, is where you get to a part where there's only so much you can do to help these people, which, I mean, many of them need attorneys. We can't get attorneys. You know, we give them as much advice as we can to try to help them through the legal system, but none of us are attorneys. So we can only go so far. And then if the other side has an attorney, it's a tough road for that person that we're trying to help. But, and I don't know about the easiest part. I guess the easiest part is, for me, is that there's less physical work involved in this than there would be, like, should I take a respiratory therapy job and walk the halls of a hospital.
So again, how many years? 35 years, you said?
Yeah, it was probably at least 10, 15 years in the hospital. And then I did DME work, which is when you put equipment into the home, medical equipment into the home. These people, and then primarily it's oxygen, which there's a lot of COPDers out there, and there's more to come, but it's just from smoking, and they've ruined their lungs, and they're on oxygen at home. And so then after I had quit working in the hospital, well, I guess I was just part-time, but I was doing more DME than I was hospital work and taking care of those people in the home. For a time, Medicare paid for respiratory care in the home for those people, but then they quit. So now they get very little assistance with anything because Medicare has cut even the cost of what they pay for oxygen.
So there's not a lot of resources that people could tap into with respiratory, with that type of stuff.
Well, yeah, with lung disease. I mean, you had some people that weren't COPD or cystic fibrosis patients, lung cancer, pulmonary fibrosis. I mean, some of those people you're not going to be able to do much with. But with COPD, the pulmonary rehab was really successful. I don't even know why Medicare quit paying for that, but they did. That was a good program for them because it would get them up, walking, exercising, but they weren't comfortable. They were more comfortable in a hospital setting or with somebody that was with them that worked for the hospital. They could tell them just to continue how to breathe right, take their O2 sats, tell them they were okay even though they were really short of breath, and try to increase their endurance. And they'd come 3 times a week. So that was a good program, but Medicare quit paying for that too, for them.
Well, then, do you also find that now in the work that you're doing with Highlines that we too lack resources for the things that victims require?
Yes. And then with everything skyrocketing in price after COVID, we're lucky if we can put them up in a motel room for 3 days, and we can't help them with rent. It's outrageous. The deposit in the first month's rent alone is probably over $2,000, which, from my understanding, you used to help some people with deposits. Well, and we have. I helped one client with the deposit and the rent. It wasn't as much. It wasn't $1,000 and $1,000, but it's outrageous.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better for our victims to be able to tap into a lot of different resources. Would you say that has a lot to do with victims' choice to go back to their offender?
Oh, yeah. It's easier to go back. It's easier for them to go back than it is to fight the system, legal-wise and rent-wise and everything. It's just easier. And that does happen, but then we usually see them again. Somewhere 6 months, maybe. Because if there's that initial problem, it doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away with them just going back.
No.
Do you find that you are more stressed out, say, in this type of a job than you were with your medical experience with? Because it seems like there was a lot of trauma that went on with your other job in the medical field where you were working directly with victims that a lot of them ended up dying because of their lungs and this type of stuff. So was that more stressful than what you're doing now?
Yes, more stressful. Because there was different aspects that we had to different, like we took care of the NICU babies and then any codes. And when they first started open heart surgeries, we had to go into cardiac intensive care units and the ACC units. So, and then you had to respond to any codes. So if there was a big car wreck, you were there, in the ER. So it was more stressful as far as, but it was, I guess like instantly stressful. You get through all that, and then could be calm the rest of the day. And then 2 days later, it could be instantly stressful, and it just depended, on what was going on. But yeah, there were rough times in the hospital, but you get kind of impervious to it, which is kind of a terrible thing to say, but you do. You get
impervious. You have to do that?
Well, yeah, or you wouldn't survive. You wouldn't.
Okay.
You wouldn't survive in the hospital. I think every nurse is like that. Anybody that's in trauma, they're impervious to it. So you almost have to be, because you would never save them. If you walked in there and saw them and you were in complete shock every time you went in there, you wouldn't even know what to do. You wouldn't follow through with what you had to do. So you just kind of methodically go through the steps.
So in comparison with that in this job, where it's the crisis may happen again, just kind of like did in the medical field, where you've got a victim that is in major crisis, major trauma, and then they come down from that trauma? How do you bring them down from that trauma?
Well, yeah, when you first see them in this line of work, and they're definitely traumatized, and I just let them talk and try to get them to tell me as much as they want to, and it seems like the more that you talk to them, the more you listen, the more open they will become as time goes on. And we do have paperwork and stuff that we give them, showing them the cycle of violence. That seems to help. If they're sitting there telling you these stories and then they read that, or one time I said to a client, not every man that gets drunk beats a woman. And the reason I know that's because I lived with an alcoholic and he didn't beat me. And she just was astounded because she thought that the reason he beat her was because she was drunk. So, I mean, sometimes you can even tell them some of your experiences.
Right. And that doesn't necessarily make an abuser just because
he's drunk.
But on the other hand, a lot of times it will escalate a situation. It's still a lot of times blamed on the alcohol or drugs until somebody can show that victim what the cycle looks like and what's actually happening to them. And do you think that makes a big difference in how they will listen to different options?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I experienced that with one client, and she actually went through with the whole thing then, left him, got a new job, moved to a different place. She did have financial help, but she was convinced that his abuse was because he drank, and if he quit drinking, he wouldn't do it, which I told her most likely would not happen. Even if he was sober at some point, he would break. And she did, after that, they were together for a little bit, and he was supposedly not drinking, and he did one night get physical with her again. And so I think she realized it, and she left. But I think, I don't know if it was just a combination of what I said and everything he did, but she did leave. So to be able to help him is rewarding. It's a different kind of emotional stress. Sometimes I almost feel like I'm taking care of another child, an adult child. I mean, the way I talk to him, the way I listen to him, and I mean, one of them I've been talking to for 3 years, so he does feel like he's another kid of mine. Maybe it's just because I'm so old.
You mentioned he. So when we talk about victims, most of the time, it's referred to as she. But do you have male victims?
Yeah, I've got another one now, and I think you're seeing it more and more with the female being just as abusive as any male, and not only that, but not willing to take actually 3, not willing to take responsibility for the child, not wanting to care for the child, which 40 years ago I don't think you saw that very much.
Our statistics used to be about 2% of our total numbers for the year that we had to report would be male victims. And it has risen quite a bit over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years maybe, that we are having more and more men that call our program and ask for help. And so you have certainly gotten your share of men that you have helped since you started here. What do you attribute that to? That females are more aggressive now than what they used to be, or what would you say that would attribute to that change?
Well, I don't know if I can really say it's one thing, but I would guess it could be society as a whole, but the way things have changed with the male-female roles and stuff, it's kind of strange that some of these women are educated, some of them in education. So you know they've taken child psychology courses and stuff like that, and they're in the education field. Yeah, I don't know why, but the women, it's definitely become the more aggressive one, or the one that fails to care for the children, which is equally as bad. And I can only attribute that to their upbringing in the two cases that I've seen. I think that the way that they were brought up is very similar to the way they're treating their children or taking care of their children.
So you believe that it's generational?
Yeah, with the one
Learned behavior type.
Yeah, and I think maybe drugs are partially involved, but I think it's the way they were treated as kids, or how they were taken care of, is how they take care of their children. And they're young. Some of them are too young to even have the child. Once they have the child, they don't realize the care and how much they have to give up of their independence, which they've never wanted to give up anyway, and they won't do it.
So again, going back to your medical field and the legalization of marijuana for medicinal purposes, do you think that is a legitimate thing, that marijuana can be and is used for medical issues that can help?
Yeah, I think it probably can, but I know that, some people say that if they're young and they use it, it can kind of rewire the brain when they're young. But I think that there are some medicinal properties to it, because I did know an older lady that was 81 that used it. And it must have done something with her anxiety, because she would call me about every other day about her oxygen machine. And once she started using the marijuana again, I never heard from her again. And I used to get a call every 3 days. So I think it did relieve some of her anxiety. But I don't know about when they're younger, but it's just like anything. I mean, if you do too much of anything, I don't care what it is. If you drink too much water, it's too much, and it's not good. So if you do smoke too much marijuana, it's not good. If you drink too much, it's not good. If you eat too much, it's not good. If you drink too much water, it's not good. It's like moderation in all things, which lots of people don't do.
If you were to compare your medical field with what you're doing now, and we talked about the stress issues and how you have to become kind of numb to what's going on, how does that affect you on a personal level in the work you're doing now? How do you process a crisis and trauma with the victims you're working with now?
Well, I mean, I'll get upset about not being able to actually help them, like, legally, and I get upset about things that are unfair to them. But I know that there is absolutely nothing I can do to change all that unfairness. I mean,
Can you give us an example of things that are unfair?
It's just the like I told you, if they don't have an attorney, they're sunk if the other one does. There's just no, I mean, to be able to answer in court, to be able to cross-examine in court, to be able to go through an actual hearing in court with an attorney on one side and say, for instance, this guy on the other who has very little education, has no command of the English language. It's hopeless. And I can't get up there and talk for him. I'm not an attorney. I can't. You just sit there and watch him flounder until it's over. And I imagine maybe the judges might feel the same way, but they have to follow the law. They have to do what they do. And so I try not to dwell on it afterwards, but I mean, I do get upset about it, because I can't even argue with this one client of mine who says, it's unfair, it's not just, it's not right. And I go, you're right. You're right. I can't argue with you about it. I don't even know what to tell you to do.
And that's tough. That is
it's hard
for an advocate to be as backed up to the wall as the victim is when we've run out of options and we've run out of resources for that victim. Then and we get frustrated, we get angry at the system, we have all these kinds of emotions, and then you think about, well, what kind of emotions are that the victim's having?
Yeah, right. I mean, they get upset. And sometimes, with these guys, all they want to do is just be a part of their child's life. I mean, sometimes I don't even think they would care if they got to see him 2 nights a week, if they could just see them without the constant bickering and somebody following them and somebody persistently calling them, when they have a child.
So what do you think that does to the kids that are involved in these situations?
Oh, I can't even imagine what they think. They've got to be confused. And as they get older, they get more confused. I don't know what's going to happen to them. It's not going to help them. I know that when they start to get older.
Do you think that this is what contributes to the learned behavior and the generational part of the cycle?
Yes.
So where it passes from one generation
to another. Yes. So
kids suffer a lot from it.
Yeah, they do, and I don't think they really know what to think, because like this one client I have right now, the kids don't want to go back home to mom, which is really an unusual thing for kids to say. So there's something behind that.
Right.
And then another little kid that's 2 that doesn't want to go see grandma, but wants to see Nana.
Yeah.
And so, something's going on with grandma when a 2-year-old doesn't want to go there. But they can't tell you.
All right.
So, yeah, I do think it's going to affect him. And it isn't going to be good. And it's just, a lot of it's just parents can't get along.
So if you could change a law or even be able to introduce a law that would help victims, what would it be? I mean, I know that that's kind of a tough question to ask, but we sit at staff meetings and we talk about the laws that are out there and that they're not being enforced. And that's part of the problem is, in my opinion, is that we have lots of laws, but they're not enforcing them. What do you think that maybe you would say that you would introduce a law or try to change a law that would help?
Well, I wouldn't even know how to go about introducing a law, but if I did know somebody that could help me, I guess, and even though we're supposed to have free legal aid here in Montana, they can't get it. They can't get it. I don't know if Montana legal aid is full of people that are requesting legal aid. I'm sure that's probably part of it.
Do you refer people to Montana Legal Services?
I do, but they never get anywhere.
They don't answer phones. They don't do callbacks or anything like that.
Well, it's you have to be very persistent.
But it very seldom does happen, and I can attest to that for all of the years that I've been here. When the legal aid first started, why we at least got a little bit of it, but in north central Montana, why we get nothing, and that is a real burr under my saddle. So that would be something that you would like to see, is more free legal aid somehow to cover Montana.
Yeah,
in a better way.
Yeah, something. We do have an attorney that will write up motions for us and things like that and talk to us about what needs to be done next. And if we want her to write it up, she will write it up. But it's still difficult to have her do that, because there's always something that follows after she introduces that paperwork to court, and you don't know for sure after that other lawyer responds, if you're supposed to respond, and it's a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this one client I have has 2 different cases with these women have attorneys. I mean, he spends 75% of his time talking to mediators and their attorneys or answering things in court.
I think we also have one where there's open a case in Montana and an open case in Colorado.
Yeah,
For the same thing.
And nobody can even understand that. Nobody even knows why that's happening.
Yeah.
I don't think even the courts know why or understand it. It's crazy. It's just some of the stuff that happens is crazy. And you'd think there would be 1 or 2 lawyers that would be willing to help with these things. But this one that we have help, she'll do the paperwork, but she won't represent him in court.
Is she local?
No. And then, you can file all those things in court. But then when you get into court, and like I said, you get somebody that hasn't graduated from high school, doesn't have a good command of the English language, doesn't understand what that attorney is even trying to do. And then he has to get up there and object to what she's doing, and he doesn't know when to object. And then if he objects at the wrong time, he doesn't want to get up again and object because he doesn't know when to object.
Well, he doesn't know. He's not savvy to the attorney court process. So being in court is very intimidating in the first place.
Yeah, and sometimes he doesn't even understand the words they use. Vexatious and things like that. They'll use a word like that, and he literally, before, has asked the judge, what does that mean? I don't know what that word means. And so, it's foolish. It's even foolish to have them go to court like that. They're at such a disadvantage. It'd be like tying a swimmer's legs and arms and telling him to compete in a race. The swimming race, that's what it's like. It's ridiculous. I don't even know why they let it happen, because it is totally ridiculous, completely unfair to that person.
Well, Anna, I'm glad you're with us. You're a very important part of our team. And again, today is your 6th anniversary.
Yeah, it is today. Yeah, August 1st.
August 1st. So I thank you again. And this is Connie Huffman with Highlines Health. And be safe, be happy, and live life.